Hey there, welcome to the Prog Monster, a site dedicated to progressive rock, hard rock, heavy metal, and other forms of rock music. My name is Murph, and I am the host of this show. First of all, I know it's a few minutes late getting into the show. Setup took a little longer than I thought. I might have to change that at some point too. So anyways, for those of you who have attended this cage match ceremony in the past, basically it's going to be pretty much the same way as it was with the first ones. However, we'll have, of course, two different albums, and the two albums we're going to be doing today. But before I tell you that, I just want to let you know how I come to determination. So I try to pick albums released roughly in the same period of time, within 2 or 3 years, sometimes 4 years. And then I try to match them up so that they're similar albums, if there's some commonality between them. The first two I did, they were both kind of bluesy hard rock albums. And the last two I did, they were kind of progressive, progressive hard rock, very progressive in some ways, some fusion elements to some of them as well. This particular two albums, and I'm going to expose them now. This one, Kansas Leftoverture, and Styx's Grand Illusion. Two very, very good albums for their type. So how do I rate these albums? Okay, so these albums to me are both what I would call American or North American prog rock or progressive rock. They both have elements of that in their music, in some degree, quite a bit of elements in that music. They also have some kind of poppy hard rock elements to their music as well as arena rock kind of thing. And they're both very similar, and that they both came from the Midwest. They also were released within, I think, 9 months of each other. And they both, about 8 or 9. Well, I think they both have 8 songs, and then the Kansas one has 2 extra bonus tracks included with this particular CD. This CD that I have of Styx is much older CD. It probably came from like the 90s, where this one I just got like less than a year ago. So it's a much more modern release of the same album, right? So both of them came out fairly close to each other. They both have progressive elements. Both bands have good singing, good instrumentation, and good music writing skills. And they both have a lot of prog on their album. So I wanted to compare the two of them and see how they came up against each other. So before we get going, I'll just give you a little rundown on both albums. This album, and I actually haven't done a look back on either album. I noticed that. I thought I might have done one on this one, but I'm pretty sure I didn't do it on it. So on this band, you have a 5-member band featuring James Young on guitar and vocals, Tommy Shaw on guitar and vocals, Dennis D. Young on keyboards and vocals, and then John and Chuck Panazzo on drums and percussion and bass, respectively. Okay, so on this album, we have 6 guys playing in this band. You have Steve Walsh on organ, piano, and some synth and vibrosizer, also doing lead and backing vocals. Kerry Lindgren, he's the electric guitar, piano, Oberheim, and some synthesizers as well. Robbie Steinhardt, lead and backing vocals and violin. Rich Williams on electric and acoustic guitars as well. Dave Hope on bass, and then Phil Earhart on drums and percussion. So I think both these albums are considered to be the top of the heap for these two groups, respectively. Both of them is their quintessential albums to own by the two groups. I haven't had this album very long. It was in my playlist for a while. I took it out, but I wanted it in my playlist, but I just was having a hard time getting into it. So I decided to add it to this cage match video to try and get myself to listen to it more. And it seems to be working. I'm starting to like it more, a lot more. This should be a band that I love. Should be. There's not a lot of dissimilarity between these two bands. A lot of similarities. So if I love these guys, why is it that I don't love these guys? That's my question. So anyways, so that's part of the reason why I did this. Chose these two. I think it's a good matchup. I'm interested to see if anybody out there feels the same way, how people feel about these albums in general. So I'm going to do some of the things I normally do when I do a cage match. I'm going to break down who's doing what on the album and see how they compare against each other. So it's kind of like you got 5 guys in one corner, 6 guys in the other corner, and they got to tag out, right? Almost like a wrestling match. So that's why I called it cage match, because no escaping until we get a victor, right? That's the way it's got to be here. Okay, so this album, the Styx album, I'm quite familiar with this album. Got it probably in the early 80s. Not right after, but probably close to after I got Pieces of 8, which is my favorite Styx album. But this album by that time was already large and was well known, and I had listened to it before. My friend had it. So it was released July 7th, 1977, Paragon Recording Studio. It's about 38, almost 39 minutes long. A&M Records, and of course produced by Styx. This album is Leftoverture, which is released October 21st, 1976. So approximately, looks like about 6 to 7, or maybe more like 10 months apart, somewhere in that area. Studio in the country in Bogalusa in Louisiana was the studio where it was made. It's about 43 minutes, almost 44 minutes long, so it's a little bit longer, about 5 minutes longer. Kirshmer, the labels, it was Kirshmer in the US, Epic in Europe and Japan, and CBS in Oceania, sorry. And then, of course, it was produced by Jeff Gixson and Kansas. So both groups had a fair bit of influence on where the album went and how it went. Like I said, my experience with the Styx album is much more substantial because I've been listening to it for close to 40 years now. The Kansas album was intermittent, my listening to it. I heard it on the radio. I heard bits of it. Of course, we all know Carry On Wayward Son. And so it was a bit more intermittent until recently when I got it. It was in my playlist for a while. I liked the album cover of this one quite a bit, as well as the back part. This one, I like the album cover quite a bit too. There isn't as much on the back, but there is a little bit more development, a little bit more writing, and a little less picture on that one. So, like I said, this is a 6-man band. So let's go first with the vocalists, which to me is the reason I like both these bands quite a bit, is they both have very strong vocals. Now, in the case of Kansas, they have 2, Steve Walsh and Robbie Steinhardt. Primarily, Steve Walsh is the singer. Robbie Steinhardt would be like the secondary lead guy. With Styx, you have 3 guys singing, with Dennis DeYoung kind of being the lead guy, Tommy Shaw more of a middle, and then JY doing the one song on the album, which in this case, I believe is is this one with Miss America? Yes, Miss America, yeah. So some really good vocals from both bands. All 5 of these singers can sing. They're all good. I would say that Dennis DeYoung is probably the best singer of the 5, in my opinion. And Tommy Shaw is no slouch, though. And neither is either Steve Walsh or Robbie Steinhardt are all very good. Dennis DeYoung's a little weaker than the other four. Not Dennis DeYoung, James Young. He doesn't sing as much, so him and Robbie are kind of similar there. Robbie does a couple songs, he does a song. Primarily, it's Steve Walsh singing, and with Styx, it's primarily Tommy Shaw and Dennis DeYoung. So the matchup, I think, probably favors Styx slightly because of their vocal harmonies. That's my main thing with them. When we get to the guitar, so Styx has two, Tommy Shaw and JY, both play lead. JY tends to stick with the electric guitar, so he will play lead electric and rhythm electric, where Tommy does both. He plays acoustic and electric guitar. He does do some soloing, but mostly he plays all of the other stuff. And both of them are very good guitar players. Kerry Lindgren, of course, is a very good guitar player, but he does other things in the band as well. So they also have Rich Williams, who does electric and acoustic guitar as well. I would say Livgren is probably as good as either Shaw or JY, in my opinion. And I don't know him as much, but he seems to be very, very, very strong on the lead and rhythm parts, and most of the music writing too, as does Tommy Shaw. So maybe it's a saw-off, 2-on-1 there. Okay, so then we come to next, we'll go with the keyboardist. In the case of Styx, they have Dennis DeYoung, who's very good on the keyboards. And of course, he does vocals as well. So he's a very strong part of this group. And at this point in time, he's the leader of the band. Steve Walsh may be the leader of the band here too. I'm not sure. He does most of the singing. He does play organ, piano, and some synthesizers as well. So he does do a lot of keyboards here. I think it's probably a saw-off in their keyboard ability. I don't hear anything that makes me think one or the other is any better. It's just that maybe Dennis does a little bit more because he's the only keyboardist in the band. Okay, then we get to the drummers. In this case, it's Phil Earhart and John Panozzo. Now, John is a very good drummer, underrated, I think. Recent years, they've used a different drummer, and he's excellent as well. But John was very good, and if you listen, he plays up the progressive part very well. Earhart, I don't know him as well, but he also plays percussion more than probably John does. So he sounds like he's a pretty decent drummer as well. So maybe I give the edge a little bit to John just because I know him better. Then you got the two bass players, Dave Hope and Chuck Panozzo. Well, Chuck is well known to me. I know his stuff a lot. This guy, Dave Hope, though, sounds very good. I might be willing to give Kansas the edge on this particular aspect. So there you have the breakdown of the group members against each other. The other dynamic with the groups is that you get sorry. I've been making videos today, so I'm getting a little bit tired. You get a lot of Styx is big on vocal harmonies. They do a lot of harmonies. The three guys, Young, DeYoung, and Shaw, sing very well together. They each have a different range, but they fit like a glove. Their harmonies, I think, are the best rock harmonies out there. Yes, does some great vocal harmonies too, but Kansas is not bad in that department. They do have some harmonies as well, but I think they're primarily more of instrumental. To me, they're more instrumental. They probably should have done more instrumentals than they actually did. But when you get to the musicianship or the instrumental part of the album, I think both bands are top notch in this area for American progressive rock bands. They both have that very American Midwestern sound. So very, very strong musically in that way. And because of the time period that these two albums came out, there was pretty heavy stuff too, not just like really classic sounding guitar riffs. And keyboards are very good on both albums, as well as the drumming, and the whole rhythm section is pretty strong with both bands, I think. So then we get to the next comparison will be between the lyrics. The lyrics on both albums are quite good. The Styx albums have some love in it. Like there's some love story here, but there's also a lot of very proggy oriented kind of lyrics. You get more of that, I think, on Kansas. Originally, I would have said I like Styx because they're a better lyricist band. But to be honest with you, having read the stuff on this Kansas album and listened to some of the songs, they're not second fiddle to Styx here at all. I think that Kerry Livgren, who writes most of the music, is pretty much right there with Dennis D. Young on the writing aspect, and he can handle himself against anybody that Styx wants to throw at him. I'm pretty sure of that. What else? The music. Okay, so this has some of Styx's best songs and some of its most progressive songs. Man in the Wilderness and Castle Walls. These are fantastic progressive rock songs, probably among Styx's best. They also have like the Superstar song. The big song, probably their biggest song, Come Sail Away, where this has Carry On Your Wayward Son, which is also a big track, and they're both comparable to each other there. This has a lot more progressive sound to it, though. I think it's a more progressive album than this one. This one has a lot of vocal harmonies, and then it has some one-off songs like Fooling Yourself and Miss America and Superstars, all like kind of rock ballads. This doesn't have as much of that because it's, I think, a more progressive album, but it's really quite good. Okay, so anyways, I guess I should put my glasses on. So we got like two pretty solid albums here. The Tommy Shaw Fooling Yourself song is one of the best on this album. And the opening track, Grand Illusion, I think is the best. In my opinion, is the best track on this album. Is it my favorite? Maybe not. Maybe Castle Walls is. I'm not sure. There's no bad tracks on this album. There's only degrees of greatness, I think. So this is definitely a master album for me. Is this a master album? Well, not yet, but it could become one. Carry On My Wayward Son. What's on Your Mind? Miracle Out of Nowhere. I like that quite a bit. And this Magnus Opus at the end. Fantastic song. Like this could become an album that is a masterpiece. And actually, I'd be surprised if it doesn't. It should have been listened to a long time ago. It's just, for some reason, I just never got into it. Anyways, great album. So what other areas can we talk about here? This album's a bit longer, and because it's a more recent release, it comes with two bonus tracks. One is Carry On Your Wayward Son live, and then Cheyenne Anthem also live. I like the Cheyenne Anthem quite a bit. I'm just looking for it. Yeah, it's one of the songs that Robbie Steinhardt, who I like, his whole image is rock star, and the beard is that red beard is unbelievable, man. Styx has no hair of that kind on their band. In fact, Tommy Shaw almost looks like a little kid on this album. And he's one of those guys who doesn't age a great deal over the time period since he's been around. If I was going to, I'm not going to give an opinion one way or the other which album I think is better. I think it's, my history dictates what I would have to choose, but I'm trying to give them both a fair shake here. The thing about this album too that I like is I think it's a bit beefier than that one. Not that this is not a mellow album by any stretch. Among Styx albums, I think maybe only Pieces of Eight and Equinox are heavier. But this album, I think, is pretty damn heavy. I can't really compare this to any of the other Kansas albums because I simply don't have any of them, and I don't know enough about them. I can tell you for certain, though, that if they're anything like this, it won't be long before Kansas is challenging people for spots on my list of favorite bands. So this album will probably go back into my playlist again and be given a second chance because I've done this. I'm trying to do things to get myself more involved with certain albums, which makes me sit down and listen to them instead of just having it as background fluff, right? I have never seen Styx or Kansas in concert. I have seen Styx on videos and watched entire live shows with Styx. Kansas, I've watched some live bits and some parts, but never watched an entire concert. I'm getting more familiar with them, which makes me want to listen to them more that way. So I think that they will get a lot more attention as time goes on because I have not explored the discography. So they're going to get more attention if they indeed attract my attention. Whereas Styx, I've heard just about everything they've put out. Some of the 90s albums, not so much. And recently I've listened to all three, the Cyclorama, Mission to Mars, and the most recent Crash of the Crown, which I think is one of the very best albums by a classic rock band to come out in recent years. That, along with the Who's self-titled album and Jethro Tull's Zealot Gene, I think, are among the best of albums to come out for among the bands that I quite like in my group of 8. So if I was to, the guitar solos on this are really good. Guitar solos on this are really good, but I think maybe I'm just hearing things, but I think this guitar player is just a little tiny bit better. I could be wrong, but from what I've heard, I think he's just a little, maybe it's just because he's heavier. He might be a heavier guitar player. The album's a little bit longer too, so you get a little bit more music for your buck on this particular, on the Kansas album as well. Overall, I think both bands are very comparable to each other. They've both been around since the early 70s. Both have put out a lot of albums. Both have put out similar style albums. Both have put out their best album in almost the same period. So yeah, there's a lot to be said for them. In the case of Styx, they lost one member to passing, and that's their drummer, John Panozzo. In the case of Kansas, as far as I remember, I think Robbie is the only one that's gone, but maybe there's others too. I haven't followed them as much, so I can't really say. I know Robbie is gone, which is unfortunate because I think he's the wild card in this whole scenario. The Styx has nothing to match him, I think. So so I pretty much showed you the entire range of this whole album, of both of these albums, and how they compare to each other, and how the individual members compare to each other, and how the albums compare, and the musicianship and all that. I think it's not a walk for anybody here. Both of these groups are probably evenly matched, more so than any of my predecessors, although the Rush Yes one was pretty evenly matched as well. But this one, I think, is even more evenly matched than that one. Big thing is I like to see Kansas do something new as well. I don't know if they have. Like I said, my knowledge of this group is somewhat limited compared to Styx. It's kind of a funny situation too, because you would think the similarities of these bands would make it almost a no-brainer that I would have gotten into Kansas long before this. But, I've proven in the past that if you think of King Crimson and Yes, and it took me 40 years to get into King Crimson, while Yes has been involved with me for 40 years. So, yet there's not a lot of dissimilarity between the two bands. I also find King Crimson has certain elements that kind of remind me of Pink Floyd. And yet I was really into Floyd for a while, but I have never gotten into King Crimson until recently. So it's the same kind of scenario with these two. Like, you would just think it's an automatic, but it's not always an automatic. Sometimes I just never get there for some reason. Something blocks me somehow, somewhere. I chose this bright color today because I'm live. Orange. Orange is a color I like quite a bit because it's bright. Kind of reminds me of the sun. You know, if you look at it at a different angle, it almost looks yellow, right? You'll have to forgive me today. I made like quite a few videos today. I do a lot of videos now, so I have to get a jump on them. Good thing we can schedule some videos, because if you weren't able to, there's no possible way that I could do my work, my job, eat and do all the things I normally have to do and make all these videos. I couldn't do it, so I have to do some of them in a set, which I did today. I did finished most of my series and my few other things that I had to do, and now I'm going to work on the other videos tomorrow, if my life permits it. You know, I have to have a life too, right? So I know that some people think that this is all I do, but they'd be wrong. I work a lot of hours doing at my job, and then I have other things and other commitments as well. But nothing pleases me more than doing this. In fact, doing that last series was one of the highlights of music for me. I really enjoyed doing that series, so I'm hoping that this next series will make me just as enjoyable. So we have, for those of you who may join me, Kansas Leftoverture. Sorry, my hand's covering that up. Versus Styx Grand Illusion. Seminal album, that's what this is. Styx's seminal album, and this is Kansas's seminal album, which means it's considered to be their best, their biggest album. It's funny that they came out only about 9 months apart too, with Kansas just coming out slightly ahead of them. The only other Kansas album I kind of have a feeling for is Point of No Return. I think that's what it's called. And for Styx, I know most of their stuff, even the stuff that might be impossible to get, like those wooden nickel records. Anyways, this video hopefully will get a result that will favor one or the other. Anytime you're typing, especially for me, if I don't put my glasses on, I never get the letters right. Oh, now I'm really screwing it up. I always get the T's and the R's and the O's and the P's mixed up because I can't see them. Sometimes the E's and the W's as well. There you go. There's my first message. Hope you all enjoy this video at your leisure, because I know that for some people this is very early in the morning. Tried to start it later. I think I might have even said that I was going to do this at 7 or 8 on the Sunday night, but because of the news show, I couldn't do that, so I'm going to stick with this time unless somebody tells me they would rather me move it to a different time slot. Unfortunately, Saturday is not a good night to do a time slot later than this because I have other commitments that I have to adhere to that I don't miss, that is. And so we're here tonight to try and resolve it. Hopefully we'll get a result by the end of the video. If not, people can still vote in and tell me what you think of the albums. This one doesn't have a lot of very long songs. I think it has one that's fairly lengthy. You don't get that on albums that aren't prog albums. Very few albums do long songs if they're not prog related. This one doesn't really give the time frame for the songs. I'd have to go look them up online, I guess. There's a nice shot of the four of them, six of them, sorry. Pretty good shot. I love that hair on Robbie Steinhardt, man. Unbelievable. Yeah, it doesn't give, oh no, it does. Here it is. Yeah, there's the one song, sorry. I know you can't see me. One song, where is it? I think it's the last song on the album. Yeah. Magnus Opus. Now that one is the longest, I think. It's about somewhere between 8 and 8.5 minutes in length. I don't think Styx has anything comparable to that on this album, although they have some longer ones on other albums. Yeah, the longest one on this album is Come Sail Away. Coincidentally, it's almost a little over 6 minutes. Got a couple close to that. So Kansas's history, I guess, goes back probably to the early 70s, as does Styx. Probably they both started around the same time period, which makes sense. And you might want to throw Journey in here as well, maybe ELO. All those bands kind of, to me, have some commonality about them. They both came out of the States, a lot of them in the Midwest area. And most of them have some similar sounds to them with some similar elements to them as well. So I'm thinking that, they are all part of that group. There may be some other ones that I'm not thinking of or I'm not as familiar with, but those are the main ones, I think. Electric Light Orchestra, Kansas, Styx, Journey. And I'm sure there's some others that I'm forgetting that people will tell me, oh, maybe Toto too. You might want to throw them in there. Although I tend to think of Toto as a pop band. But they did have that progressive element near the beginning and were heavier at the beginning in their career too. And of course, they came out of Kansas, the same as Kansas. So they would have, around the same time, so they would have had that impact. Some people might go as far to say Foreigner, but Foreigner to me, it's like their names say, they have some forward elements to their music, which means they're not quite the same as these other bands. What about REO Speedwagon? Do they fit into this category as well? I'm not really sure. I'm not familiar with their music at all. There are some Canadian Midwestern bands like the Stampeders and Steppenwolf and BTO and the Guess Who. Maybe the Guess Who doesn't really, or Guess Who and April Wine don't really, or the Stampeders, they don't really fall into that category because I think they were earlier than these bands. But I think BTO and, BTO definitely would fall into a category somewhat similar to this music, which again, it just only that much more proves to me that Kansas should be a band that I quite like. They should be right up there amongst the bands I like, but they're not even mentioned in my top 100 bands. I do not understand it, but it's happened before. It was the same with Gentle Giant. They seem like a band that I should have loved, but they just took forever to take off. They're only now starting to gain a lot of popularity with me among the new progressive bands. So the difference for me, too, between American progressive rock and British progressive rock, or Great Britain if you prefer, the British one tends to, I feel, have a lot more classical elements in their music that give a different kind of feel to the music. Whereas with the Americans, they tend to be more blues and a little bit more, maybe a little bit more guitar oriented. Maybe that might be a way to put it, or jazz fusiony, if you like, than a lot of the European ones. Although, Yes has done Relayer, which can't get much more jazz fusion elements to it than that one. But that's my tendency to think of the British bands as being more rooted in a classical sound, where these American bands more maybe a jazz and bluesy type element or fusion. And Andrew Jarman has joined this. Sorry, I guess I should put my glasses on because it's hard for me to read without them. Sorry, Andrew Jarman. You're right about that. These are two fantastic albums. I think this is a equal battle. I try to get it so either of the bands could win the battle. There's probably more similarity between these two albums than there is dissimilarity. There's so many elements here that are so similar between the two bands. And that, again, of course, brings up to the reason, like, how is it that I never got into Kansas, but yet Styx is one of my favorite bands? They should both be up there. There's no doubt about it in my mind. And maybe Kansas now will have a late start here and move up. That's what I'm hoping to challenge myself to do. So I'm just curious as to how people feel about the two bands in general. I know Styx had its elements in the 90s that were not favorable with Styx fans. And I don't know that Kansas had that same element. Did they go through a similar period, or a period of not really, for lack of a better term, selling out, we used to call it. I don't know if it's a sellout or not. Oh, I see that Andrew says that Pete Pardo did this similar album. I wasn't aware of this one. I'll have to go watch that video. I knew he did one on Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, and I specifically stayed away from that battle because I didn't want to compete with that particular thing. I did not know that he did that, but I can understand if he did. He's very astute when it comes to seeing what albums are similar and what are not, right? So I tried to stay with some different elements here, but apparently I'm not original. There's a surprise. Yeah, but if I was to say, like, this is a very different cover. Such a memorable cover, and I think this one is just as memorable. It has elements about it that are. Yeah, I can see that he would have selected Styx. His taste in music is not entirely dissimilar from mine, at least early on anyways, maybe in our similar age range or around the same time. We both started out with Kiss, and we both had similar elements that we like, but he went off much more into the metal realm than I did. I tended to gravitate more towards progressive rock, and then, of course, a little bit more towards the blues-oriented stuff later on, before I kind of came back. I also had, I think, a bit more of a poppy element to my music than he does. But, I got a lot of these ideas from watching his shows, of course, and from other people. There are some other music ranking shows, if you want to call them, out there, that, or classical music rock stations out there, that channels out there that I've watched as well. Jeff Lynch being one of them, and the guy from Great Britain, who's very analytical but knows how to break an album down. I really enjoy his shows too. Yeah, I hadn't heard that debut album by Journey before. It was the first time I'd ever ever have that I'd ever heard it. And the first listen to, I will admit fully that I didn't like it. The second listen to, warmed up to it slightly. But by the third listen to, I was now getting my brain into patterns, which I need to do to process it properly. The last listen to, I really gave it a full listen and paid attention the whole time. And I have to say, the debut song on the album, I really like it a lot. It's been in my head since then. The rest of the album, I'm not sold on. Yes, I see the progressive elements to it, but as I was getting to the difference between the British progressive rock and the American progressive rock, is the American progressive rock tends to be basically solos or drums and guitar and keyboard solos that tie songs together, and they do it through a kind of bluesy, kind of jazzy way. Whereas with the British, for the most part, it's a song that they've put together which has guitar, drum, and keyboard kind of solos that tie in with the song. So one side, I think, is more the soloing part, and the other side is more about the song part. Neither are bad. It kind of depends on what you like in music. I tend to like the song part better, and then the solos fitting into the song. Where for people that like the North American progressive rock more, they tend to like the soloing, or if you want jamming session that goes on with the music, progressive rock here as opposed to over there. But neither one of them, of course, fits 100% into those categories. There are bands that are British and Jethro Tull comes to mind, who like to do a lot of jamming and tie the song together with them. They do a lot of that. And then you'll have bands over here that, Styx being one of them, that has songs that tie the musicianship into the song. So you get both. It's not by any ways one way or completely completely the other way. I hope, I know he gave me my next assignment, which is supposed to be Queensryche's Empire. Now, I have listened to this album before. It's not bad. It has some elements about it that I don't care for, though. But I'll get into that when I do the review on the album. However, it's not a bad album. I will go as far as to say that. So this is going to come to an end soon. So if anybody out there wants to give their vote on who they think is the better of the two albums, or which album they prefer more, is probably a better term. Because I don't think even if one completely sloshed the other one, they're still not bad albums, no matter how you want to look at it. Just what do you prefer? That's what it is, and that's what this is all about, is talking about music and why you prefer it. There's no right or wrong answer here. I remember one time a guy told me that if you choose any album other than Dark Side of Moon as the best album ever, then you're messed up. I said, well, then I'm messed up, because that's not my favorite album all the time. That's not even my favorite Pink Floyd album, So it's just a matter of personal taste, and sometimes it's just when you get the album, it's how it hits you at the time period. The album comes out at a different time period, doesn't hit you the same way, right? And of course, it's all impactual. So I'm not going to give my pick right till the end, but I think people will probably guess what my pick will be. But if I was, so I'm going to be doing another one of these, but it won't be till next month. This is at best a once a month show, just because it's time consuming and it's difficult to come up with matches that really are close. I want them to be as close as they can, because if you really like something like this, and then you don't know anything about this, maybe that's going to get you into this, and that's what's more important, right? So let me put something here. Okay, time to put the glasses on again. Okay, so we've got one vote here for Kansas, and I'm not really surprised. For people growing up in the States, especially, this band has got to be one of the biggest of all time. Does anybody know, are they in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? I don't think they are. I don't think Foreigner is either. I know Styx is not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. All three of those are tragedies. They all should be in there if they're not. I just don't know enough about Kansas to be able to tell you if they're in there or not. The whole Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is just kind of a money scam, I think. There's people in there that aren't even rock stars that shouldn't have no business being in there. And I have nothing against the individuals that are in there who aren't rock stars, but they're not rock stars, so they shouldn't be in there. If you're playing rap music or pop music of that nature, you shouldn't be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Or maybe the pop music you might want to let go, but definitely not rap music. That's not rock. That's something completely different. They can have their own rock, their own rap Hall of Fame. If you have a rap Hall of Fame, does that mean that Rush is going to get in because they did one rap song that wasn't even a rap song, just part of a rap song? I doubt it. We're getting down to the end here, guys. I feel my obligation is to let you know that I will be signing off at 6 since I have other obligations to attend to, and they won't be pleased if I show up late. They never are. It's okay. People have to have what they want, and if they trust you to do it, you got to do it, right? This was fun. It's getting more interesting each album we do. I found out a lot of stuff about Kansas today that I did not know before. I even found a few things about Styx I wasn't aware of, but I've long loved Styx. It's long been one of my favorite bands. They've probably been, when I originally started, I just had my top 5 favorite bands once I got away from my Kiss being the only band on the planet. I don't know how, I think about that now, how did I go from 1975, mid-season in 75, all the way to mid-1978 and only listen to one band? That just seems ludicrous to me. However, when you're young, that's the way it is. We're often driven by that one band, and that was the band for me. It wasn't until after that I started to break up. And by the time 1980 came, this band was in my top 5 already and has been there ever since. They've never not been in my top groups. When it became a group of 7 for a while, they were in 7th place, and then they moved back up again. But a band that I don't think I've ever had a real kind of slow period with. Maybe small ones, but when you think about a band you've been listening to for 42 years, what's a slow period? A year? 2 years, maybe? Rush went through a long period in the mid 80s all the way up until the mid 90s before I started listening to this stuff again. But the best part about doing this kind of show is that it really makes you get and start listening to the music that you love again, and that's, to me, is what I really wanted to achieve here. Yep, I agree with your assessment there, Andrew, 100%. When I thought of, I was trying to think of bands to compare, and I said, well, maybe I can compare a Styx album with something because I like Styx quite a bit. And as soon as I picked this one up, I thought, you know what, that album, I wonder if it was released at the same time period, and it was. And I thought, well, there's so many things that are so even here and so much alike. Now, anyways, the show is going to have to wind up now, and I would probably have to cast my vote with Styx only because I know this album is so much better. If you were to ask me in a couple of years, after I've had a couple of years with this album, it might go the other way. I don't know. But I hope that, so that makes it a tie at this point, 1-1. So we won't be crowning anybody today, but we'll be back with another one of these episodes next month. I'm going to try and do something in the heavy metal realm, since I've now done a kind of hard rock one and a sort of progressive element here, and then a very progressive element in my last one. I would like to do a heavy metal one next. So anybody want to give suggestions, that would be great. I don't want to do the obvious one. I don't want to do the Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, Number of the Beast and Screaming for Vengeance type of thing. I'd like to do something different in that realm, and it might require me to listen to a couple of albums. I've got a ton of metal stuff here that I haven't listened to, but I'm not really a metalhead. I didn't know that about myself until I started this, but I've got a little bit of it in me. I do like some heavy metal, but I'm not definitely, it's definitely third most important to me after hard rock and progressive rock. And then there's some pop elements I like. I like the Beatles quite a bit too. Maybe I do a pop one. People give me a couple of pop groups that I could do. That would be great. So anyways, I'm going to sign off now. I'm grateful for Andrew for showing, and for any of you who watch this video later and like it. I will continue to do this and see how it goes. And these are the only live videos I do, so I need to do more of them to get more exposure and for the music. And this was enjoyable. It took a while to put it together, but anything worth having is going to take some time to do. So again, I hope you enjoyed this. Please like and subscribe. It's really appreciated. And we'll be back next month with yet another album cage match of some sort or another. I will put something together and hopefully everybody will like it. Anyways, you take care, and everybody have a good day. Bye.